Fire isn't all bad, or is it? In today's episode of Plaas TV, Plaas Media's Izak Hofmeyr discusses this topic with expert Prof Kevin Kirkman of the University of KwaZulu-Natal. His interests include vegetation ecology with a focus on vegetation-animal-fire-environment interactions in grassland and savanna areas and restoration of disturbed landscapes.
Professor Kevin Kirkman of the University of KwaZulu-Natal is, amongst others, a fire ecologist. He has been studying high rainfall sauerveld areas and ecology his whole life. And we are standing here just for the contrast in front of Aldam, the Allemanskraal Dam here in the central Free State, in front of all this water. Kevin, fire ecology. Talk to me about it. What is fire ecology?
Fire ecology, in the context of the high rainfall sauerveld grasslands of South Africa, is a study of the role of fire in maintaining those grasslands. Now, in the high rainfall sauerveld grassland areas, those grasslands are maintained by fire and grazing, a combination of the two. So where fire is removed from those high rainfall grasslands, they tend to move away from grasslands into shrublands and potentially, in some cases, eventually into forest. So those grasslands are ancient old growth grasslands, but they are maintained by fire and grazing. And the two can't easily be substituted for each other. In other words, you can't substitute grazing for fire or fire for grazing. One needs, ideally, both.
So the whole notion that fire is bad, full stop, is false.
It is false, and there is a lot of information. In fact, there was information presented at this Congress of the Grassland Society of Southern Africa yesterday in the Drakensberg areas, which is high rainfall sauerveld, that fire, and particular fire applied irregularly, is very important for biodiversity in those areas.
The farming methods have changed over the years, and the whole notion of high density grazing is coming in. Would that possibly be a replacement for fire where you hammer your veld, so to speak, much more?
Up to a point, if you have higher grazing intensity and higher stocking rates, then there's less material left at the end of the season that might potentially burn. But it's virtually impossible to always remove everything with cattle. Cattle graze selectively. There are some species and some areas that even under high intensity grazing that will not be grazed efficiently. And in those cases, fire still has a role to remove dead biomass, dead grass biomass, and allow for fresh growth to come through. Obviously, in any grazing system, if your grazing intensity or the amount of grass removed by your cattle is too low, and you have to burn a lot to remove that material, then you are actually wasting food from an agricultural or from an animal production point of view. So ideally you would like to have a balance where you manage to graze most of your grass available, but there'll always be some where you need to burn. And if you have no animals, you'll obviously need to burn frequently to maintain that grassland. If you have a lot of animals or a lot of grazing, then your fire frequency can decline.
But the parameters, what guides you to know how often you should burn?
Again, you need to look at your veld, and you need to look at it from two perspectives. The one perspective is forage quality. So if at the beginning of your new growing season, there's a lot of dead biomass that animals are not going to eat, you can't force those animals to eat it, they would rather die of starvation. Then a fire could be very important to remove that dead biomass and start the new growing season from a clean slate, where all the grasses have an equal opportunity to grow and the quality will be very high. So that's the one aspect. The second aspect is to look at it from an ecological perspective. In many of our high rainfall sourveld areas, you do get bush encroachment. Ohout, that is a very good example in some parts of the country, and there are other shrubs that do tend to come in. Where you have high burning frequency, they are kept under control. If you have low burning frequency, they can become problematic. So I think there are two aspects to look at it. Look at the health of the grassland system and look at your forage supply for your animals, both in terms of quality and quantity.
There is another aspect, and that is the whole thing of voorbrande. What do you call the voorbrande in English?
Fire breaks.
Fire breaks, there we go. And yes, those are made in the same place every year.
Yes.
And it seems to me that must be negative on the long run.
The problem with fire breaks usually is that the fire break forms part of your paddock, and animals will go and graze on that fire break preferentially every year when the rest of the paddock is not grazed. So yes, in the long term that can and has in some areas become a problem, but in some areas in fact the fire break is still very healthy. So the grassland, the high rainfall sourveld grasslands are adapted to fire and they are adapted to grazing. So it's, in some areas it has been a problem, in other areas not. In fact, in some parts of the country, some parts of KwaZulu-Natal that we've looked at, the only place in some paddocks that you can find grasses like rooigras is in the fire breaks. So there's, they do need fire. What I have also seen in some areas where farmers tend to avoid burning is that when you do get an accidental fire, the fire breaks recover very quickly, but the paddocks or areas of veld that have not been burnt for many years take a long time to recover because the fire burns into the ground, kills tufts, and it takes a long time to recover. On the fire breaks themselves, the fire moves through quickly, doesn't have much impact.
Again, the eye of the farmer is the critical factor here.
Absolutely critical. And again, I would push for having a decision-making system to decide when to burn. So you don't burn because it's August the 1st. You burn because there's a reason you need to burn, either for your cattle performance, cattle production, cattle food supply, or you need to burn for an ecological reason because you may be having bush encroachment, you may have not burned for a long time, you may have a build-up of fuel, which if you have a runaway fire will cause a lot of problems. So make an active decision, decide when you're going to burn, and if you've made that decision, then decide under what conditions you would like to burn. Do you want just a relatively cool fire to remove the biomass, or do you want a relatively hotter fire to kill any encroaching shrubs or bushes? So there are quite a few decisions that need to go into that act of lighting a fire.
Kevin, thank you. Professor Kevin Kirkman from the University of KwaZulu-Natal.
Ons stel bekend, die nuwe, sterker as ooit tevore, 165 kW Hilux GR Sport.